Welcome to Chapter 10. Chapter 10 deals with secure assets. We go a lot in this chapter into physical security. But let's again look at my slide deck for ease of instruction. All right, so secure, again, that's how to connect with me at various platforms. Bio, again, we'll just leave this on there just for information, copyright. All right, so in Chapter 10, the whole idea is for you to learn about physical secure assets and how to manage safety controls, and then, of course, protect the actual data assets. In the first module, which is the module A or the sub-module, we look at how to protect facilities and assets with physical security controls and how to detect and prevent environmental hazard. So generally, when you see this picture here, you see how physical control is important. You've got the fence, you got your parking lot, and then in your building, you have the interior of the building, like zone 2. But then for your server rooms, you need to provide security for your server rooms internally. Because we always say physical security is very, very important. So the whole idea here is when you think about facility and location concern, what measures do you need to take for security? Because it's not just only about the organizational assets and risks, but your actual facility construction and the location. Some of the considerations would be like crime and vandalism rate. In some parts of the world, like say the US, you got to be careful where you can get this data quietly. Storm, earthquakes, like natural disasters, and reliability of the utility services, and even emergency response time. If you were to have a fire, how long will it take the team to get there? So some places they have all this, they see the thing rising from the ground, not just a bullet, but these are like barriers and entryways, security to prevent somebody from ramming into your building, right? When we're also looking at physical control, we would think about surveillance. What roles do the cameras play in terms of not just detection? Maybe they could be preventive for some people. There are different types of cameras here, some IP-enabled cameras. In some facilities actually we have like a dummy cameras, but don't do dummy cameras, do the real cameras for security control. But also you have security sensors like for the door, motion, noise detector, and environmental sensors. Even mobile surveillance now is very important, like drone or unmanned aerial devices, either through a remote control or they're just there hovering over the facility to check on your security. For entryways, especially around server rooms, maybe you think about electronic logs. Make sure that you log your entry and exit using electronic logs or conventional logs, whichever one you figure that is better. But for also securing equipment, previously I mentioned about laptops. You need to make sure that you use like cable locks for those easily, I call it mobile devices, or even cabinets. Make sure that you lock them down with cable locks. Because physical security, again, is very, very important. And then the network security portion is saying, avoid placing like network devices, whether it be wireless access points, routers, in places that somebody can easily just reach out to them. So just watch out and do like your site survey. For air gap systems, you hear what's called like a sideband attack. Just be aware of that. Just because it's not connected doesn't mean that it's safe, right? So there's always a little good discussion about how much is the physical security. In the other materials, I have a little discussion questions for you. If you're one of the students for the final year courses, please look at that and send me any message. But environmental controls, so the physical security has a lot of overlap with like safety or overall facility management. Nowadays a lot of places are controlled with the HVAC systems. But it's not just even that. We know that humidity affects equipment, but also electromagnetic shielding, fire suppression. These are very, very important as it relates to environmental control. For the HVAC system, because they produce a lot of, like electronic equipment, they produce a lot of heat, all right? So you need to have a way of cooling down the system, especially in data centers. If you're running your computer 24/7, you need to make sure that you have proper cooling. So it's telling you that it's always a good idea to place environmental monitors with like clusters of sensitive or maybe power hungry equipment. So wherever you have sensitive equipment, you should be aware of its environmental needs and have appropriate controls. That's why when you go to like data centers, you see like it's aligned properly for purposes of uh, heat or dissipation of the heat signals coming from them. So EMI, electromagnetic interference, is a very, very important concept. So it is an electromagnetic signal. So when it happens, like in frequency that are used by radio equipment, you hear the word RFI. But since electrical currents generate the same sort of EMI, and the noise can also affect other equipment. So you tell you that the best way to protect against EMI is to avoid sources of interference like electrical equipment or microwave when you are trying to place your cable. You also have one other thing here, electromagnetic pulse. This is it's a more severe but rare. It's EMP, which is generated by a brief but very powerful surge in the electromagnetic radiation, like maybe lightning strike, nuclear weapon, or even ordinary electromagnetic discharge. Here, fire suppression. I believe in, I call it stackable credentials. Do your A plus first, do your net plus, then do your security plus. It makes it a lot easier, but also it avoids gaps in knowledge. I've seen people that have like CISSP and they don't have like any technical background. I think that's a disservice to your team. So I have the highest cybersecurity from CompTIA and CISM, but I did A plus, Net plus, Security plus. So this question on fire suppression is on the A plus exam, used to be on the A plus exam. But what you need to know a lot about is the class C is for electrical appliance. So just know that if you are looking for fire extinguisher or fire suppression equipment, class C deals with electrical appliance. If you have a fire, you don't want to go and pour ordinary combustion of pour water in there, right? Just be aware of that type C. So how do you coordinate security and safety protocols? So you always consult your building layout when you're planning both for security areas and like fire escape routes. Coordinate safety drills. Most organizations have this safety drill and how they use alarm and security doors. There's a discussion about safety and environmental controls. Here, what I usually talk about is fail secure, fail closed. How do you have like doors? If it fails, should it open outside so people are not trapped in the building, or should it not open outside so people do not steal your equipment, or somebody doesn't like trip your controls just so they can be able to get out of the system? All right, let's look at a few assessments before we get to sub-module B. What kind of motion sensor works best in tight spaces with obscuring objects and tight corners? All right, so if you know infrared is like with your remote control, passive infrared, ultrasonic. These ones tend to be susceptible to interference. So this will be microwave. Next one, what qualifies as both a preventative and a detective control? Choose the best response. This is always a tricky exam question. So usually it's a security guard because they prevent you from getting in there, and if somebody gets in there, they can find out who went in there. All right, question 3 here. You want one server closet has particularly sensitive equipment that is suffering EMI due to a nearby electrical motor. You can move either the equipment or the motor. So what option might help? So it's not air gap. Throw that out of the way. It's not man trap. Man trap is that device that when you get in, it locks you in, and the back one closes so you can go outside, right? That one is meant to prevent tailgating and piggybacking, right? So that, and it's not code R, because code R has to do with placement of in data centers and stuff, right? So it is Faraday cage. You also use that in forensics, watch the forensics videos. Fail close door lock. So in other words, the door fails, like there's a change in electrical circuit, it closes. Doesn't allow you to get outside, right? They are blank. So choose So they are bad for your safety, but they're very good for security. That's why C is the correct answer here. So you're building floor plan, you see lines representing a PDS. What is it used for? This is really talking to you about unencrypted data. All right, so let's look at the module B quickly. Here, I want to describe data lifecycle, how to control data access, and how to apply encryption. Because remember, whether you are on premises or cloud, you need to think about encryption. So data is considered the new oil. So information has a life cycle from when you create it or when you acquire it to using it, storing it, to the third stage of retaining it, archiving it, and then, of course, final stage of disposal or wiping when you no longer need it, right? So all of these might have implications for compliance or also encryption. So data has three states: data in motion, which we call data in transit, right? When you're moving it from point A to point B. Data at rest is stored on your disk. And of course, data that is being processed or data in use. Each of them has an encryption requirement. This is a classical classification of data: top secret. It could cause grave danger to national security. Secret. It's less sensitive than top secret, but also serious danger. And you got confidential. It's less sensitive than secret. So usually, if you have like different like security clearance, you will go with the data. So this is part of what we call a mandatory access control, right? Not discretionary. That we think we covered it already before. And of course, you have unclassified. Unclassified, like in some government, I mean, in the US, you still have to issue what's called a FOIA request, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request to get access to those data. If I'm talking about data types, I might think about copyright, like a written information like music or program, or patent and invention, of course, trade secret, financial information, legal information, private data. Those could be ways I can classify data in general. So you're going to get a test question, especially with GDPR and California Protection Act, about sovereignty. Basically, it's just about talking about where is that data, what law covers that data. It's usually it's the country where it's stored, and that's data sovereignty, right? You will hear the word data residency being used interchangeably. Just be aware, especially if you're going to be in management level too, that it might be illegal to store some data in other nations. That's why like a lot of cloud service providers have regions or places where they store the data to be in compliance with law. So just know the definition. Data sovereignty is the concept that the data is subject to the laws of wherever it's stored at, whichever country it's stored in. That's data sovereignty. You also hear the word geolocation data. Indicates like the real world location of the person or the system. So it has a lot of use, like if I'm applying location-based access control, part of maybe ABAC, or if I'm looking for suspicious activity, that's geolocation data. So when we're thinking about data themselves, we have protection controls and their policies. So we classify the data, we talk about who owns the data, data governance, the retention of the data, and of course, finally, the disposal of the data. But when I'm collecting the data or using the data, I need to think about both technical or operational controls like access control, encryption, privacy control, DRM, which is the data rights management, and of course, DLP, data loss prevention, to prevent the data from going into the wrong hands. Sometimes many operating systems, people use the operating systems like file permissions or encryption. Like in the case of Windows, you have NTFS, you have Linux. So or server message block, how do we give permissions to access of the data? So you hear the word that network permissions are typically set on like the share level rather than on the file or directory level. But you just say when sharing and local permissions conflict, the most restrictive or the more restrictive applies. So data segmentation is similar to network segmentation, where we put like instructors files, admin files separate from HR files, right? So in the case of data segmentation. And basically, if you say I have two data sets, I can like divide them up. Maybe they have different regulatory requirements. So I want to segment them for make my compliance simpler. Like maybe need to know data as opposed to general data. So if I have issues of sensitivity, I divide my data assets based on maybe their purpose or who needs the access to them or where they will be used. That's the same concept, right? So the whole idea is that even if I'm backing up the data or archiving it, I need to keep that in mind. Now, DRM is very, very important, especially with the issue of it's kind of a part of software, almost like watermark, if you think about that concept. So maybe here I use license keys, description keys. So if I require you to sign into your account when you're installing or using the software, that's part of my DRM purposes, right? Or digitally signing up the codes or contents using digital certificates, backing up software with security hardware. These are, and you see the word digital watermarking. Even using steganography could be part of DRM approaches. For data loss prevention, see this diagram in here. I'm the user, I'm sitting there and I want to send an email. This actually happened to a colleague of mine. I send an email, I have an agent installed on that system, right? It goes over here to the enterprise network. It says, am I going to block this? Am I going to encrypt it? Am I going to allow it? And it makes a decision based on maybe the permissions or whatever you've configured. All right. So let's talk about privacy protections. So there's a question about you can have security and privacy. We cannot have privacy without security. Private data must have security controls based on the CIA requirements. But not only am I thinking about the CIA, I also have to think about privacy controls for regulations, right? And of course, our stated privacy policies. So privacy doesn't just apply to my own personal data. If I have access to customer business data, I must maintain this privacy based on our applicable laws and the contracts with the client. So what many organizations do, they have to figure out what privacy enhancing technologies they're going to apply. So know these five concepts in here. Anonymization, basically, I'm going to completely and irreversibly strip that data, strip the PII, which is the private personal identifiable information, right? I just strip it. So you can never really go back to it. The less restrictive one, which is the pseudo-anonymization, also hear the word pseudonymization. It says reversibly substitute PIE in the private data, but does not remove it. And of course, tokenization, I replace a sensitive piece of data with a unique identifier, which itself has no privacy value, like something like token value. I use that when we collect data sets for training AI modules. Also, data scrubbing is obfuscation, meaning making it confusing, remove secret or private information from a data set. And then finally, data masking, where it is part of the pseudonymization. I scramble, randomize, or replace data components while maintaining maybe the same format and structure. So the whole idea is what do I need? What is my requirement? What kind of privacy technology am I going to apply? Just know those. But the non-technical privacy controls like PIA, doing assessment part of the risk management, or this one is called data minimization. And I don't need any technology to do this. It just means I'm only going to collect what I need for my job, no more. Right? If I'm trying to figure out if the number of people that were affected by got the COVID after receiving vaccination, do I really need your name? So I could just collect the data and collect the minimum amount of data I need. Now, retention and disposal, this could be governed by laws or the needs of the client. Basically, if I don't need it, I'm just going to have to delete it. And then laws about breach notification. If my organization suffers a data breach, I need to notify the relevant outside parties as well as my internal chain of command about the loss. Privacy notice and agreements. You know how you go on the website, you see terms and condition and privacy notice. The privacy notice is just a statement, right? That you give it to your clients or anybody that is subject of your data telling them what you're going to do with the data and what they can do to opt out or otherwise preserve their rights. This is usually a requirement for most laws. Terms and conditions is like a binding contract between you before you subscribe to a service, use my product, or do business with me. It says, hey, what are we doing? We're going to have to agree to these terms and conditions. Yeah, data security is very, very important. So let's look at storage encryption. USB drives are very, I put it, they're very powerful means of compromising a system. There's some USB that are put into a system and totally will just fry out the whole system besides stealing information. So many organizations will actually block USB access. They will not just do they block it in the BIOS, they actually will physically put some like a tie on there that you cannot enter the USB. But many of them anyway, they have high built-in encryption if you're going to be able to use them to encrypt the data. So some of them have encrypted data files in them. So you're just saying, maybe even think about applying full disk encryption to protect the entire drive and the entire system. For disk encryption, you have the self-encrypting drive. You've got the encryption at the file or folder level. And of course, you have the block device encryption. There are different hardwares for encryption. You have the self-encrypting drive, like smart cards, TPM chips that is now required most systems now to even have Windows 11 on them. And because you have the hardware security modules, which is also a removable device that provides for key exchange and cryptographic functions. And then this one, secure enclaves. So it says computers can include some crypto processing features either in the main CPU or in the motherboard chipset. For key management services, how do we store the key? So encryption keys, they can be stored in a KMS along with other secret like certificates and password. So when you need it, you can have a way of maybe retrieving them. But whatever way I'm using it, it varies per platform. But the point is that most of them support like what I call cryptographic functions, such as encryption, decryption, digital signature, and verification. For Windows, the encryption, you have the Windows file system. It's like almost a combination of symmetric and asymmetric encryption. It allows you to encrypt individual files or folders using an encryption certificate in your user vault. So that BitLocker can encrypt the entire volume, such as your system drive or even your removable drive. That's called like a BitLocker to go, right? So using a stored key on the TPM on your drive. This is Windows specific. So if you're using Mac or Linux, you try and find the equipment. So how do you assign an NTF permission? That's a very good exercise to do. So I don't need a file anymore, data anymore, or storage media or medium anymore. How do I destroy it? So you have different methods like pulverization. Think about just pulverizing, reduces the document to like loose fibers. Pulping says reduce the paper to a liquid slurry and separates the ink from the filter. So it's almost like a pulverization, but it changes into like a pulp. And of course, incineration, think about fire. Basically, I'm going to turn it into unrecognizable ash. These are more severe than, say, I'm going to take a piece of paper and shred it or zigzag shredding. These are severe ways, right? But in all cases, before you raise any data, ensure that both the business needs and regulatory compliant, make it safe to delete. So what you might want to do is install like a secure deletion program. For an entire hard drive, sometimes they ask you to use a formatting tool that overwrites the entire drive, or some system write 0 zeros over there 9 times, whatever the requirements are. For SSDs, it says we move data around as it's written and deleted, so to maximize the limited lifespan of the flash drive. So my approach to SSD will be different to my approach to HDD. So, but firmware and settings in computer hardware and network appliances, even mobile devices, they have valuable information that an adversary could try and retrieve. So there are different methods to erase them. Let me go back to this slide. For hard drive, you hear about degaussing, which is like applying a magnet in there. right? That's why it's trying to distinguish SSD, because SSDs don't have a moving parts or platters, right? So SSDs are flash memories. All right, quick review questions. To reduce the chance of privacy leaks, a medical research database identifies each individual patient by a randomized ID value, like a medical ID value. A separate, more tightly secure database maps those IDs to the real name. What is this approach called? Choose the best answer. So the token is that random value that I'm assigning to them, right? So I can map it back. Your organization has a degausser in the basement. You see the word degausser, you automatically think of hard disk drives or tapes, anything that has is susceptible to magnet. What media can it securely destroy? Select all that apply. This kind of question is tricky because some people will only pick one, whereas there's at least two answers, just like here. So eliminate CDs and DVDs that have, or Blu-rays. Eliminate paper documents. So I've got rid of B and D. So I'm now left with A, C, and E. And I just finished telling you that SSDs don't have platters or anything that could be affected by magnets. So it has flash memory. So that now leaves you with A and C, backup tips, right? What cryptographic tool is commonly built into a motherboard? Choose the best response. If you have a Windows 11 operating system, you know you've got this, which is a TPM, right? It's not full dick. This answer requires you know what these initials mean. If you know the meaning of the initials, then you're only going to be confused with C and D. So here is clearly a D. All right. Your organization has a critical database full of customers' PII, and a new employee was just authorized to use it. How will you best describe the role of the system administrator who configures users' permission in the database software? Choose the best response. So here now, data owner will be like the CEO of the organization, the person that's ultimately responsible. But many times they allocate certain responsibility to other people, right? So it's not your privacy officer, and it cannot be the owner because this person is like a lower level. So it's going to be the custodian, right? The only way you can say you are confused would be with C, the steward, person that is holding, but this answer is the custodian. All right, so in summary, by now you should understand secure assets and how to manage safety controls and apply physical controls, how to apply safety and environmental controls, should to classify data states from rest, transit, in use, the data types and what policies to apply to them, and then how to perform secure data disposal and storage encryption. The lawyer in me wants to explain something about this last point. Please remember there's a concept about a hold. So if you have data, you receive a hold, like a litigation pending, then you have to take that into consideration in terms of how you're going to dispose of the data. You might have to hold on to the data pending a release from the court. So even if you had to really hold it for 7 years or only 1 year, but you get an order, you got to wait till the court case is finished. So again, that's chapter 10, secure the assets. Feel free to send me questions. Again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.